Well, we're officially down to our last presentation of the Virtual Hockey Summit, and it's a good one. Coming up next, coaching site founder Aaron Wilbur is going to sit down virtually, that is, with Rod Brindamore, head coach of the Carolina Hurricanes. They'll be discussing what top coaches think about coach-player communication strategically. I like it. Good stuff. Known as a good communicator. This will be a fascinating conversation. Rod certainly appears to have the respect of his younger players in Carolina, and perhaps the advantage of leaning on a 21-year NHL career and knowing what buttons to push when, maybe not push too much. I know I'm looking forward to it. I also want to point out that the drills that our presenters have used during their presentations will be available to download post-event thanks to our friends at Coach Them. Coach Them, of course, is a digital drill drawing software that keeps you and your staff organized and focused on running great practices, not wasting hours planning them. You can connect with them, by visiting them at their booth in our partners section, and you should expect an email with instructions on how to access the drills in the coming weeks. Also, if you're new to the coaches site and have enjoyed the presentations over the course of the summit, then consider getting your association or league signed up for a group discount. You can save up to 50% on the cost of an annual membership and will receive unlimited access to our entire library of content, which is updated on a weekly basis. Now it's time to head to Raleigh, North Carolina, and check in with Rod Brindamore, the head coach of the Carolina Hurricanes.
Welcome, everyone, to day 2 of the Virtual Hockey Summit. Thanks for everyone for hanging in there and taking in all the presentations. This is the last presentation of the event, and I am pleased to be joined now by the head coach of the Carolina Hurricanes, Rod Brindamore. Coach, how are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me. Last but not least, is that it?
That's it, man. So, hey, first off, we connected back in December of 2019 when you guys were rolling through Vancouver. You were kind enough to join our podcast. Man, a lot's changed since then in the world. Just in where you're located, obviously a lot going on with COVID, but I know that you've also been dealing with some storms. Everybody safe and sound on the family side? And
we're obviously down in Raleigh, North Carolina. It's kind of par for the course this time of year with the weather. We seem to deal with that every year. But obviously the bigger questions are going around that everyone's dealing with the COVID and whatnot. I think we're making the best of it. Everyone's trying to figure it out, and I think that's all we can do is the best we can, right?
For sure. Well, that's good to hear that everybody's maintaining down there. Rod, when we spoke about this presentation, really the seed for me got planted back when you joined our podcast, and there was something you said that really stuck with me, and I could draw a direct line, certainly as a coach, but it really stuck with me just in how I kind of viewed communication, in particular I've got a teenage son, and I had asked you what your message was to your team during your first training camp, and you said, if you believe in the message, why should you change it? But guys don't want to hear the same thing over and over again. You have to be creative. And you referenced that was something that you were really working on, was how to change that message, or not change the message, but change the delivery of the message over the course of an 82-game season. And, certainly one thing I've observed in the work we do at the coaches site is that the best coaches, they view communication as a strategy. And they view it through a lens of something that can help them win or lose hockey games, depending on how effective they are with it. So I was hoping today that we could maybe touch on some moments and instances that all coaches can relate to in the course of a season, and also go through a little bit of video from this year's playoffs and talk about some specific situations and how you handled it.
Certainly. Well, I'll touch first on, the communication thing. I think every coach you talk to nowadays, I don't care what level you're at, they all view this as the ultimate, right? I think coaching has become more about the way you relate to players than it is about what you're actually teaching them at the NHL level, for sure. Like everybody, we'll go through systems, and I'm telling you, 90% of the stuff is the same. Every team is doing. Like, everybody's trying to basically do the same things. There's a few differences in the way they do it, but so what's the separator? Is just getting your players to buy into that, and then figure out how to get the most out of your players. And that really is, at the end of the day, that's what coaching is at all levels. Is taking a kid, whether you're coaching a peewee hockey player or an NHLer, is I want him to be the best player he can be, in the framework of what hockey is, which is a team sport. So, the communication is just basically, I think, getting to know your players and getting to know what makes them tick, because they're all a little bit different. And I think we've really changed over the years as coaching, especially in the NHL. The days where, coaches were, hard, say hard ass. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that, but
you're allowed to say that.
They were tough on you, and that was just the way it was. And in a way, that's not bad. I just think it's changed. I mean, we probably parent differently now. I know I do, different than, my dad, who wasn't definitely not a hard ass, but certainly a lot tougher than I am on my kids. And I don't know necessarily that it's right or wrong. There's a lot of good things that we were taught back there in the day. And that was to respect, I think the respect to your elders and the people in those positions. But I think we've changed. And so you have to change with it a little bit. And I think all coaching now is that communication, just letting them know, listen, just being more honest and open with your players. There's nothing wrong with that. And I think that's kind of where it's all gone. Really at every level. There's still that respect. There is still that authority. Someone has to be in charge, but I think there's just they're on the same team and on the same level is kind of where it's at the NHL level anyway.
Well, I think that's well said, and I think adapting is a big part of coaching, and certainly I think just in general, just the time we're in right now, we've all had to adapt considerably. And I wanted to start with the bubble and the playoffs that you just experienced with your team. From an outsider's perspective, I give full credit to the NHL. I think there was a stat that came out the other day that they administered over 30,000 COVID tests. Not one came back positive. I would have bet a lot of money that wouldn't have been the case when this started. But I also look at the schedule, and, case in point, like when the NHL final schedule came out and Tampa Bay had to play like 48 hours later, and there's a back-to-back situation in the Stanley Cup final, like I would think that just that overall experience of playing every second day, not having a home rink to go practice at, all the limitations of, probably pretty hard to get away from your players if you want some time alone. Was there anything that you took away from that in terms of the efficiency or how you would communicate with your players? Because obviously it wouldn't have been the same routine that you would have been used to.
Well, to your point, to start off, the NHL did a phenomenal job and is doing a phenomenal job out of an adaptable situation, a tough situation to deal with. I give them full marks. I mean, we were up there for 3.5 weeks. And we didn't have a hitch on anything on that they ran, to the testing aspect of it and the safety concerns and following all the guidelines that were in place by the government. And I mean, it's mind-boggling that went on. No one really sees all that because they just turn the game on at night and you go. But they did a tremendous job on that side of things. And this is a different challenge. And we said it going in to this playoff. The team that's going to win is going to not only be the best team on the ice, but there's a lot of other factors they're going to have to deal with. And that mental grind of sitting in a hotel room, for now it's been whatever it is. I don't even know. I've been home for a month or whatever. These guys are still in there. That was what I knew was going to be the biggest challenge, to be quite honest with you, is being able to handle that, being away from your families. Like, it's one thing to be away for a little while, but to not even check in, to not even come home for a bit. And I just thought that was just going to be the biggest stress on groups. And it did. You saw it in some teams. They didn't handle it that well. Others, the teams are still playing, obviously, handle it really well. But you got to give the league full marks for how they've administered this. Again, your point, being an adaptable situation, that was one of the things we stressed to our guys, is just to expect the unexpected here. And every, curveball comes your way. That's what it is. Like, that's not something we didn't expect to happen. And we faced it too. And even in our time there, we had a game that was supposed to play and we're getting ready to go. And then the game before us went to 5 overtimes. And so suddenly our game gets bumped to the next day. Okay, no big deal. Like, you know everything is going to be a little bit different, and you accept that going into this. And that's what you see now. You got to give the league full marks for pulling this off. We're still getting to see a Stanley Cup winner here in the next week or so, so it's going to be great.
Well, you know what? Not to sort of fast track, but I just want to touch on the instance you brought up with with your game not just being delayed, but obviously postponed till. And I think it wasn't just postponed; like you had to play like fairly early the next day. I think it was a Saturday. When that happens, I mean, coaches are no different than players. You're mentally getting geared up, getting focused, and then you got to sit there and wait. Your players are probably half dressed. It's human nature. That's got to be really frustrating. Like in those sort of circumstances, as a coach, do you have to have like a check-in with yourself to make sure that your body language and just how you're carrying yourself is sending the right message? Because I would think that that's not necessarily natural in that environment.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think so. How we were handling that was, again, everything we talked about before this even started that bubble situation was to expect the unexpected. So we'd already kind of covered that. This was a perfect situation. We weren't sure what was going to happen. I mean, the players were at the rink, so they're watching the game just like everyone else is. They're sitting in the locker room. We got TVs in there. The game's on right outside. Like, we know what's happening. We know the potential that this game might get pushed. So we kind of knew they also had, I think, an hour and a half or 2 hour. I think it was about an hour and a half where the time frame where the game ended. The next game couldn't start any earlier than that because they had to clean. So we knew, okay, look, we still have for sure this much time. So the players all kind of just we waited to warm up. We just made sure our routine stayed the same, meaning before the game could start. So our guys never actually got warmed up yet. We were just waiting to make sure, but we were all sitting there waiting. And then to your point, the body language, I'd walk through the room a couple times and just kind of chat with players and keep them loose. Like, don't be frustrated. If they say that I'm frustrated, I wanted to play. We've been sitting there all day waiting. It's an 8 o'clock game, and let's go. And so you can't show frustration. And we kind of just made it light. Like, hey, can't wait to get this going whenever it is. So the players can, they don't want to see a coach that's frustrated. That'll get them frustrated. And then, you're just adding stress to a situation that's already pretty stressful.
Got it. Well, so let's, go back to, more of obviously that's a outlier type situation. When it comes to just your regular routine, we'll start with practice. I would imagine that your staff probably on a daily basis meets to map out practice and what's going to happen on the ice. But is part of that conversation about the message that's going to be delivered to the players, the language that's going to be used, if there's any specific conversations that have to be had with players about, their play or perhaps what's going on in their life away from the rink. What does that look like when you and your staff get together?
Well, that's kind of all encompassing right there. But I think just to deal with the practice side of things, I'm a big, the word preparation. I don't like getting caught off guard. Or last minute stuff. So we actually always prepare practice the night before we leave, the rink. So if we have a game that ends at 11 and we're practicing the next morning at 11, like that practice is now done before I walk out of that rink to come the next morning. So we kind of feel like, okay, we can spend time looking at the game. We can do it. We have practice already done. If we don't want to scramble, and it's based on, for me, I have a little format that I like to use and just keeping it simple. But, you have your how length of practice you have. Most people on this call will probably have an hour. And we break it down into, you got your warm-up drills. And the one thing I'll say, I don't like to waste time. I don't like to waste a minute. And I don't even like to waste a drill. People say, well, do a warm-up drill, just do some shots. Like, everything should have a purpose, to get better. Whether you do we do like some face-off stuff where you're just stationary face-off walkthroughs, but then it ends up to your warm-up shots on goal. Like, you're just something that, you're getting better at, even though you're just warming the goalies up. You were trying to teach something too in that. And then we have a competitive segment where the guys are working, against each other, whether it be one-on-one, two-on-one. We like to have a little competition in there. And then what are you trying to teach? So this leads to the practice. Like, what are you trying to get out of the practice? And that's something that we have talked about as a staff the night before. Okay, what do we need to work on based on those games, whatever? Let's get better at one thing. I think I stress that more than anything. Like, you can always get better at 100 things. There's always things to get better at, but if you just touch on something a little bit, I don't think you get it done. So let's go and hammer home whatever it is, the forecheck today, because we weren't very good at it. So that practice is going to be pretty much all the drills, team-wise, is just forecheck drills. And it's going to be at maybe a little nauseated, and, like, we're going to overdo it. But when I walk out of that practice, I'm going to ask the player walking out the door, what did we learn today? Well, I know where my route is on the forecheck, or I know what, as opposed to covering 5 things, and then we don't really get better at anything. So I always feel like, what's the theme today? What do we got to get better at? Let's make sure that the practice is geared to that. And as far as the staff, like, obviously I'm very inclusive with my staff. So we all put in our 2 cents, what we need to get better at. And then, there's a million other things that go on before practice with, coaches talking to players and this and that. But as far as the actual practice goes, you have a little, like I say, that warm-up segment, and then some competitiveness, and then what are we getting done today? That's kind of how I draw it up.
Wise man once said that the path to everywhere leads to nowhere. So when your players walk in the rink, so you guys have everything prepared. When your players walk into the rink, what are they going to see in terms of information, about the practice, be it, the drills, or is there anything that you want to kind of get across to them before they hit the ice?
Yeah. I mean, our pre-practice routine is a lot of, consistently we'll have, I got the guys getting there, the NHL, we get there almost, I think it's an hour and a half before practice. And that allows us to have meetings. So we'll have a team meeting, which is based on maybe a couple clips from the night before. Again, we're trying to get better at one thing. So it'll be a theme. And that usually is then the theme that I'll practice. So like I just mentioned to you, the forecheck, I might show, okay, look, we had 5 clips that weren't good. I'll show those, or the good ones too. I mean, just how we do it. And then we get into, that's our theme of the day. We may have a special teams meeting. Again, very short. My meetings, I know from being a player, you cannot sit there and talk to them very long, because you just lose it. So we never have video over 2 minutes long. People think that's short, but you can have anywhere from 10 to 15 clips in 2 minutes, because if they're real broken down to the point, and then it allows you some time to discuss each clip. I think that's the better way to go. So anyway, we try to keep the meetings tight. And then that's all before practice. So now we hit the ice, we go. And then when the players are done, depending on when our next games are, we have off-ice workouts. So that's a very important segment too. And the players know that when they walk in, it's on the board what they have to do for the day, meaning their off-ice stuff. They can do it before practice too. If they want to get there early and know, okay, I've got X upper body workout, blah, 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 they can do it before, they can do it after, but it has to get done before you leave. That's kind of how it goes. So that, to your question, what they see when they walk in, that plan will be all out, and we go from there.
So just want to go back to the video, because I'm going to present some video to you, and I don't want to lose your focus. So when you're showing like 15 clips within 2 minutes, in my mind, I'm like, well, how do you get your point across? Like, are you just talking through it while it's live? Or, I mean, that doesn't give you a lot of time to say pause and break.
Well, it does. You'd be surprised. Like, we're on a clip, like literally a 10-second clip, I could spend 2 minutes talking about it, because generally there's 10 players on the ice. There's 10 different, for us, there's 5 guys. I'll be talking about 5 different things on a 5-second clip, because there's 5 different guys should be going different areas. And so it can be long, but yet you can get your point across with a 10-second clip, and so the video doesn't have to be long. I find that the guys learn more from watching, so that's why we include the video versus me just standing up there drawing on the board. They'd rather see themselves in clips. And so, especially the bad ones, it's funny, like nobody wants to be seen in the bad clips, but if you want to get attention, show some bad clips where guys are screwing up, and they'll be in a full attention mode, for sure. But again, you're never really ever trying to embarrass anybody in a clip. So you got to make sure that's where the communication, how you relay it, it's a teaching moment. So if you're in the clips, it's a teacher to get you better, and the team better. And so, we always end with the positive one. We'll make sure that the last clip is somehow us doing it right, and kind of end on a positive way for the most part, unless you really want to make a message that we were bad the night before, and it's all kind of encompassing on how you want to leave that meeting with what the thoughts are for the players. So but it's got to be short and precise.
So then, we go on ice. I imagine you delegate that, certain coaches are running certain drills. When one coach is running a drill, do you have any rules amongst your staff in terms of, are you the only one that could, for example, blow a drill down and critique it, or can every coach blow the drill down? And, with coaches, I guess, have various touch points, on what they're trying to focus on within that drill. How do you guys sort of break down that communication to maximize your practice time?
That's a great question. You definitely have to have somebody in charge. Okay. Like, you can't have 3 guys blowing whistles at different times and talking like that. That'll just be chaotic. But what you definitely have is, someone in charge of the drill. So, I generally do most of the drills, but then occasionally I'll have one drill practice where one of my assistants will run it, and then he runs it. I mean, it's his whistle, he's on it, and he takes it. So there's one voice, one direction, but the corrections are always there. So whether it's almost a feel kind of thing, but generally how it works is the drill will happen, and I'll either blow it in to explain it, or one of the assistants will grab guys after they've done their drill on the side and go, hey, and talk to them. So we don't have to delay. We want to flow. We want to get practice rolling. If it's a specific thing, obviously, that the whole team needs to see, that's when you blow it in front of everyone and go, hey, this isn't good or whatever. But if it's just little things individually, then that's when you have good assistants. They pick that up. And, when the guys come to the side, hey, you got to be here. So we're not slowing things up for everyone else.
I have yet to meet the coach who says they don't have an open door policy.
Right.
But I think if you ask a lot of players, they'll tell you that, across all the coaches they may have played with, some were a lot more accessible and had a more of an inviting demeanor about them. How do you, I think your situation is maybe a bit unique in that, you've got a lot of young players that are probably still trying to figure their way out through the NHL, and you probably got players on your team that hadn't done a load of laundry until they got to Raleigh. So how do you sort of, A, how do you create a welcoming environment, and B, how many of the conversations that you have with your players would be about, non-hockey stuff?
Well, honestly, that's probably a whole nother topic you could go on forever on, but it's interesting. Again, it kind of goes back to our original point about how things have changed. My career played 21 seasons. I probably had, that I can remember, 5 times where I was in the coach's office in 21 years.
Wow.
You just didn't do it, right? Even in Carolina, when I was, at the end of my career, I didn't even know what the coach's office looked like. I had never been in there through the whole thing to even know if they had a bathroom in there, like stupid little things. I just never went down there. So when I became a coach, I was kind of like, oh, this is neat. They had this in there. I didn't even know, that was down there. Now it's much different. And I think across the board, like you said, all the coaches have open door policies, but how many guys actually come down there? If you're going to come down there, you better have a good reason. I think for the most part, most of the communication gets done with, I think, the coaches kind of walking around or on the ice skating in a more natural environment. But, we always say that, come on down. And we'll have guys that love to come in. Justin Williams used to come in all the time, sit down, grab a chair beside me. We go back such a long way. Whereas Jordan Stahl, who's our captain, rarely will come in, but he'll grab me all the time when I'm out and about. It's just the feel. But I just think it's important to have relationships with, especially your leaders, because if you can't they're the ones getting your message across better than you. You plant the seed. They have to be the ones to buy in and push it on their teammates. Otherwise, you're not going to have any success. So, especially at this level, the higher levels you get, it's you got to have great leaders to help coaches succeed. And at lower levels, it's a little different for sure. But it's that again, that going to your communication thing, if players feel like they can come to talk to the coach, I just think that makes them feel a lot more at ease, because the players always think the coach is like he's on them. And a lot of times the coach he may have made a correction, said your name, yelled at you for a second. He's not thinking about you at all for the next hour. And meanwhile, that player is stewing for an hour, the whole time going, oh, the coach hates me. He's yelling at me. And you'll be like, what? I don't even remember yelling at you. I don't even remember talking about. So if you can have that immediate feedback, a lot of times players can go out and play at their best, right? Which is what you want.
So, you just touched on, how your leaders can sort of spread the message, and you make a great point. Like probably a lot of that depends on what level and age of player you're coaching, but this is maybe a little bit top of mind. I'm reading Joe Torre's book right now, and he really stresses the fact that when he got to New York, he had Paul O'Neill, David Cohn, and he had a rookie player named Derek Jeter who would ultimately become his captain. And he said, he learned really quick that if he was the one delivering the message all the time, that, again, you made the point out off the top, like it's just going to get stale. But he would actually have like strategic meetings where he'd pull those players aside and say, listen, you need to go talk to so-and-so about, being late for batting practice. I could see how some coaches could view that as, perhaps meddling or pitting players against each other. But, if that's done, I guess my question is this, is there a right way to do that so it's a healthy part of, I guess, managing your team and managing your message?
Well, I guess you always hope you're doing it a healthy way. I think in a perfect scenario, when you have the ultimate team and the coach never really has to tell players to do it because they police themselves. They're on it. The standard is set, and you would never have to have a guy that's coming late or coming to talk to them because their standard is what it is, and they understand that. Now, that's a perfect world. There's always a few guys you got to work on, no matter what. And I've done it a few times where I'll grab a captain or someone and say, look, I've talked to this guy enough. Like he's not getting it through me or one of my assistants or whatever. Like, it's got to come from you. At the end of the day, their peer pressure is the best way to get things across. They're playing for each other. You got to sit down and talk to them. But I guess I haven't had that here in a couple of years I've been doing it. I guess got a great group of guys. And again, that leadership, they snuff it out way before I have to, if that makes sense. They're on it. And so, again, you're not always blessed to have great leaders in there. And that's where coaches have to step up a little more. I think the best coaches that have won and continue to win, they have those guys in there. They have those guys that take charge of the room way before you have to.
No, I think that's great. And that's so important. As you said, sometimes that's a little bit of, I guess, luck of the draw, depending on who's in your room. So listen, we're going to get into some video, but I just want to, before we do, I just want to talk about, your demeanor on the bench. And, I can see, you talk about how players see things through a different lens, like, and I mean this with all due respect, but I could see how easily, you could be a pretty intimidating guy and a pretty intense guy. And, it's an 82 game season. Is there anything that you go through, or is there sort of a body language that you go into a game, or a demeanor that you want to try and emulate every game to sort of, that you think is going to help optimize your team's performance?
Well, it's a good question. Your body language, how you want to present to the team, all that. Here's what I know. If you start thinking too much about everything you're doing, what you're saying, you're not going to be yourself, right? Like if you're always trying to, like this is the one thing I was always worried about. My first press conferences after games. What am I supposed to say here? Like I know what happened. Like I know what I want to say, and I thought, why am I hiding from it? Why do I? Other than I got $25,000 fine for going off this year on a call that I still don't. I need some help on. People need to tell me how that's a goal, but I think it's just easier to be honest and be yourself, because then it's less stressful. So I think being a coach, number one, you got to be yourself. And I've seen a few coaches come through at the NHL level where I thought were just not good people, and then they changed because they were trying to be something they weren't. And then they changed to, they said, hey, I got to just be who I am. And they were great coaches, great everything. We're going to make mistakes. I just think be honest, be upfront. So your body language, like I don't go into it thinking I'm going to, I have to present this today. But no, I'm into the game like these guys are. I got to be passionate about it. If you're not passionate about what you're doing, you're not going to, that's not good. And we're playing a sport that you have to have energy and emotion. So it's okay to show it. Now, is there a point where you got to go crossing the line? Of course. I mean, that's common sense. But I'd much rather err on being yourself and, showing some emotion and just being passionate about it. And if that gets you in a little trouble here and there, you can live with that. But be yourself. That's the message. I guess I'm mumbling around here, but that's really what it's all about.
No, man, I love it. That's great. So listen, we're going to get in this video. So one thing before we get into that, so you guys you play the playing round against New York, and we're going to watch a few clips from that series. We'll watch a few clips from the Boston series. This jumped out at me when I was going through the Boston series and going through the box scores. So you're playing the team with the best record in the regular season, and you lose the series 4-1, so you play 5 games, but you only get outscored by 1 goal across the entire series. So maybe the first question is now with time to reflect, how do you look back on that? Because I imagine that's a glass half full, half empty type of thing, depending on how you want to look at it.
Well, talking about Boston, to me, that was one of the best teams in the league. Obviously, coming into that, I mean, Tampa and Boston, I think, were the 2 in the East that you had said probably going to come out, and so we got them in the first round technically, and we had this Ranger series. I don't know how you guys want to differentiate. To me, that was our second round playing Boston, but yeah, I like the fact that we got to play the best team because why wait 2 or 3 rounds to get kicked out? If you're going to go home, I'd rather go home early. That was part of it, let's play the best team now and see where we stack up. And we didn't play, if I look at the 5 games, we didn't play our best. So we didn't deserve to win. That's how I take out of it. But to your point, I feel pretty good about the fact that we didn't play our best and we were in every game and had a chance to win every game.